Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now, I'm very excited to be here. It is the second hour of my show, and we have a lot to be talking about, okay? So make sure you stay tuned because, like I said, I have so many different and even exciting fun topics that I'll be talking about with you. So make sure you stay tuned because, like I said, we have a lot of conversation to get into. So make sure you do that. But also, I really want you to be a part of this conversation because right here on Relax Radio, we're always about what you want to hear. We're always about your thoughts, your opinions, what you want to hear, your questions, your experience. That's what Relax Radio is about. It's always about you. So make sure you stay tuned and make sure you text me on 07852473473 and you are a part of this conversation because, like I said, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and your experience says on everything. On everything we're talking about. It doesn't even have to be about what we're talking about. It can be any experience in general, okay? But also, if you feel like you have any experiences that can relate to what we're talking about, well, make sure to text me and tell me about it because I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, so make sure you do that. But also, a very quick reminder that while you're at it, while you're here listening to me, make sure you go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can always be a part of this show. You can make sure you can make sure that you can make sure that you're always a part of this conversation, you're always informed, and you are always updated on everything that is happening in the United Kingdom. So make sure you do that, but also make sure to download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. That way you can make sure that you know that way you can actually make sure that you can listen to us from your iOS device or your Android device. And you can also make sure that you are always a part of this conversation. So make sure you do that. And that also means you can tune into to our conversation whenever you want to. You can always you can always be a part of our conversation as well because that's what we want to do here. So make sure you do that because, like I said, we have a lot of fun and interesting things to be talking about. Okay, but let's actually get into this conversation about what you consider as a perfect mother. Right now, we've heard this so many times. We've even come across the term perfect mom. We've even, some of us have even been in that situation, right? So let's talk about what exactly is a perfect mom and why it's so detrimental and why, the cult of this perfect mother actually has to end. Okay, so for example, you take a normal mom, right? Like, you take into or rather, for instance, you take into account what a mother normally does, right? Her duties, her responsibilities when it comes to having children. So one of the best examples that I can think of is, for example, if you're a mom, you're late for your son's school conference, or you forgot to pick up your daughter's prescription at the pharmacy and you still haven't figured out what you have to cook for dinner tonight, right? And I know a lot of moms can relate to this. I know my mom can because she has three kids. Okay, I have two other siblings, so obviously my mom has to deal with all three of us. And because you're a mother, because you have so many different things, especially when you're raising three children, you have a lot of things to actually keep in mind, because when it comes to raising children, it's not just your children. You have to take care of your husband, or this is what the narrative nowadays is. You have to take care of your husband, you have to take care of your children. You have to always put them first. You have to completely forget about your needs and your wants and whatever, because your family is important to you, and it doesn't matter what you want and what you like, because your family is your priority, right? And we've heard this like so many times, right? We've heard this narrative, we've heard this stereotype so many different times. But obviously, even though that's the case, even though we've heard this narrative so many different times, there are still moms out there who are in fact, who in fact have to go through a lot of negativity. They have to go through a lot of tough times just to make sure that their family is okay, just to make sure that their kids are okay, right? And that's what is sad, because you have a lot of these moms who are doing what they can to the absolute to their to the absolute best of their abilities, sacrificing everything. They give everything, but regardless of them doing all of that, they still have all these societal pressures, they still have all these different you know stereotypes and even narratives that they have to live up to. So obviously when it comes to all these instances, it's in fact, let's face it, it's quite hard to be a mom, right? And because we live in a society that is, constantly forcing our moms to become better moms, it's hard for them as well, right? So getting back into this conversation, or getting back into this example that I was just giving you, how sometimes you might forget to do certain things for your kids because you haven't even figured out what you have to make for dinner, but you also have like so many other things at the back of your head and so many other different responsibilities. And you almost like start hearing voices in your head that say, you're a bad mom, you messed up and you'll never get better. And then you sort of promise yourself that you will do better, you promise yourself that you'll become the perfect parent and never mess up again, right? And how many moms out there have actually experienced that? And even if our moms don't tell us that they experience it, you and I have both, we've seen our moms go through it, right? Because obviously, if you're really close to your mom, sometimes she doesn't have to tell you things. Sometimes from the way she acts, from the way she behaves, from the way she values herself, you can see that, she doesn't feel like she fulfilled all her duties. She doesn't feel like she did enough. And in fact, she doesn't even feel, worthy and valued. And that is something that a lot of moms actually face. That is something that a lot of mothers go through as well, right? Because that's just how society works. We have this ridiculous narrative set out for women, even men, but let's focus on mothers right now. We have this ridiculous narrative set out for mothers out there, and we just expect them to, be completely okay with this detrimental narratives, and we expect them to play into the stereotypes that we have created for them, right? Because to be quite honest, what mother actually hasn't experienced what you would refer to as the perfect mom syndrome, right? And how many times have they experienced it? I'm pretty sure they've experienced it countless times ever since becoming a parent, right? And repeatedly, these repeatedly, we ourselves, especially if you're a mom, our mothers, themselves, they actually fool themselves into believing that they don't measure up as mothers, and that perfection is a solution. Because let's be honest, how many of our mothers have actually sort of had to live up to these expectations? How many times have our mothers themselves blamed themselves for something that wasn't even in their control? Sometimes the pressure that you put on a mother is so much that they blame themselves for even the littlest thing. Okay, let's also talk about how looking after a child, taking care of a child is something that's so undervalued, right? You don't pay mothers to stay at home and look after their kids, but I personally think that you should do that, because looking after a child, taking care of a child, is something just as tiring, is something just as strenuous as an 8-hour job. Especially if you're a stay-at-home mom, then your job isn't 8 hours, it's actually 24 hours. So in fact, mothers should be compensated for the fact that they're staying at home and looking after children. Because we have this whole ideal of, mothers are raising the future generation, you're doing a service to society, you're like, the pillar that holds families together. So if that's the case, then why are we not paying moms? Why? I've always had that question, and I think it's a very fair question to have, because our mothers do just the amount of work that our fathers do. If anything, they do much much more, right? And I'm not trying to compare who does more work, but I feel like when it comes to the role of a mother, mothers are so undervalued, they're underpaid, they're unrecognized. And even when it comes to taking leave, leave, especially when you're pregnant, when you have children, even that leave is like, the pay is so bad for those leave days as well. So it's like there are so many problems for all the mothers out there, who there are so many problems that they face as well. And what happens when it comes to our mothers feeling like they aren't enough, feeling like they're not contributing enough, feeling that they're not worthy enough, is that they measure themselves up to perfection. They always try to be perfect, and they think that if they try to do everything perfectly, then they'll earn redemption for their mistakes, and they'll gain back that, right to be mothers, and they'll be considered, role models when it comes to becoming a perfect mother, or when it comes to being a good parent. They think just because they're perfect, they'll actually, you know, they'll actually be more appreciated, they'll actually be more valued. And the truth is that is nothing wrong with our mothers. If anything, it's society who has to blame for this narrative. It's a patriarchy that has to blame for this narrative, because you've put so much pressure on our mothers to be this ridiculous, unachievable, epitome of perfection. It's not even achievable. And the moment they don't achieve it, they feel so bad about themselves, right? So like I said, it is very, very important that we consider some of these narratives, consider some of these stereotypes that we've created, and we look into how very harmful they are, right? Because like I said, when all our mothers are trying to be perfect, they think that when they're perfect, they'll be worthy enough of parenting children and of giving and receiving love. And like I said, it's commonly known as a perfect mom syndrome, and it's not only unhealthy, but in fact, it's very, very harmful too. Now, in a study that was conducted at the Ohio State University, new mothers who were worried about what others thought about their parenting skills actually showed less confidence in their ability to parent. And studies also showed that people who strive for perfection suffer from anxiety, low self esteem, and depression, as well as eating disorders. Now, what's important is when, as a society, you're placing this, burden, you're enforcing and you're endorsing and promoting these narratives that mothers have to be perfect, that they have to always, be selfless and whatnot. You're actually, in fact, it's quite detrimental, because you're placing so much of stress, you're placing so much of unachievable, ideals, unachievable achievements, if I put it that way, for all these mothers out there, and you're making it very hard for them, because the whole point of trying to be this perfect mother is trying to do everything perfectly, right? And the chronic stress that perfectionists can experience is actually thought to play a role in in these health concerns that are there, especially things like low self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. But like I said, despite all of the struggle that they go through, mothers are still underpaid, they're overworked, they're exploited, they're overlooked, they're frazzled, isolated, and perpetually guilty because they think they're not doing enough. Okay, so this is a very important conversation that we need to get into, because this includes, breaking down some of the very negative, detrimental stereotypes and narratives that exist within society. So make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few minutes after this break to discuss and take down those narratives and make you aware of why it is harmful.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. You buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends, and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value, it may still be doing quite a good things.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well. And they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he might say to me, "You had one to forget."
That's it. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise, and I am very, very excited to be here because we're talking about something that is very, very important. Okay, we're talking about motherhood. We're talking about how there is this whole, idea. There is this whole ideal of a perfect mother, and how this ideal is in fact very, very unhealthy. How it's detrimental, and how it has a lot of negative impacts for a lot of mothers out there. So that's what we're talking about. Make sure you stay tuned because, like I said, this conversation is going to get really interesting. And also, I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this conversation as well. If you've been in that position, if you felt like you weren't doing enough for your children, please do text me on 07852473473, or even just, you can comment beneath our Facebook Live videos and whatnot. So make sure you do that because I would absolutely love to hear from you about about that as well. So make sure you do that, because like I said, it would be amazing if I can hear your experience and I can share your experience with everyone else who's listening in as well. And also make sure to download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And that way it will actually help you to stay updated. It will help you to be informed about everything that is happening in the world, and also right here in the United Kingdom. So make sure you do that. And make sure you also follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can be a part of this conversation 24/7. Okay, so make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get into this conversation. Let's get into why it's important that we sort of and that we why it's important that we break away from this ideal of a perfect mother, and how exactly it's causing a lot of detrimental effects. So right now we'll actually be talking about all the detrimental effects it has caused, and how a lot of mothers out there are facing a lot of health, both physical and mental health issues, because of this ideal that exists for them. So in the UK, half of all mothers actually develop a mental health problem either before or after birth, and this is according to the National Childbirth Trust. So, around 10 to 15% actually experience postnatal depression, and many researchers believe the prevalence is even higher. And around 30% of domestic abuse begins in pregnancy. Suicide is actually also found to be the leading cause of death for mothers during their baby's first year. So let's talk about the statistics, because it's overwhelming, it's alarming, and it also shows that we need to consciously make an effort to actually make sure that our mothers are okay, to make sure that young mothers, women who are going to be mothers, are okay. We talk about that we need to talk about the problems that they face, and why these numbers are so high, because especially in a day and age where everything is so evolved, where we're technologically advanced. We're in 2021, come on, it's not like the 1800s or something anymore. So if that's the case, if we're living in such an advanced time period, why is it that still that these numbers are really high? Why is it that some mothers still have to die, or they die because of all the depression that they face and whatnot? And why isn't it isn't it being spoken about? Why is it so stigmatized? Why are these numbers still high? Because like I said, when Sigmund Freud first came up with these, ideas he had about how the brain worked and everything, people called him a madman, right? But obviously, we're way past that. We understand, mental health is something very important, something we need to talk about, and something we need to diagnose as soon as possible and give medicine to as soon as possible as well. So, despite all of this, then why are we still at this standstill? Why are we still having huge numbers of suicide because of depression, postnatal depression and everything, right? That is something that we really really need to discuss. Now, the research commissioned by the Red Cross and the Co-op in 2016 actually found that nearly half of mothers under 30 feel lonely often or all the time, and 82% feel lonely some of the time. Okay, now fewer than 7% of couples actually, which is done according to which was done in 2019, according a study that was done in 2019. Now, according to that study from the University College London, they split the domestic load, let alone the mental load, equally. Okay, so I just want to first make you aware of all these statistics and then actually talk about the problem. Okay, so like I said, mothers have this whole, they have this issue, where they feel like what they're doing is not enough. They feel like they're not worthy enough of being parents, and obviously that's because of all these, ideals, all these narratives that exist within society, where mothers are, supposed to be like robots basically. They're supposed to be happy all the time. They're always supposed to put the needs of the family before theirs, and they're always weirdly supposed to be happy and not get angry all the time, which I don't understand. because we're human. We all get angry at one point or the other. Forget gender, because there is this whole discourse also when it comes to gender and getting angry, but obviously that's for another day. But we're human, we get angry, right? So why is it that our mothers are not allowed to express this anger? Why do I constantly want to see them as this happy-go-lucky person who's never sad, who does everything perfectly? Why does this narrative exist? Is it because most of the time, even back then, when it came to these advertisements about raising children, when it came to advertisements about households, you literally didn't see the father anywhere. You'd see him coming back home from work and the mother being all dressed up and looking after the children and being happy. But other than that, when it came to taking care of children, you would never ever see the father anywhere around, even in advertisements, right? So obviously, you sort of begin to understand that even from all the time back then, this idea of this narrative has actually progressed, right? The fact that when it comes to parenting, when it comes to taking care of children, it's more of the mother's responsibility than the father's. And honestly, that to me is the most ridiculous thing. Even if I was alive back in the 1800s and they told me this, I would still be so I would still think it's so ridiculous, because it's not like it's not like only the mother is responsible for a child, right? Basically, when you're making a child, when you have a child, that is a collective decision that is made by both parents. So why exactly do we place more of a burden on the mother, and we don't even pay them for it? They're underpaid, they're unrecognized, they're unvalued, and we don't recognize anything they do for us, but we still we still have this whole idea that we want them to be perfect also, regardless of the fact that they actually have to take care of the child, they have to take care of the house, they have to make sure everything's perfect and in order to sort of to live up to those social ideals, to live up to these social expectations of how mothers should be, in addition to the fact that they get absolutely little to no support from their husband, or the father of the child. So I actually heard this story of I heard this story of this newly married couple. They got pregnant and they had a child, and when they had this child, the mother was this was right after she had given birth, right? And obviously, right after you give birth, it takes time for your wounds to heal and whatnot, right? So obviously, after that, what happens is, when you're taking those, when you're taking time, when it takes time for all those wounds to heal and whatnot, it's not like you can wake up at 3 in the morning and change the diapers of your baby, right? Because you're tired, you're in pain. And her husband actually refused to, change the diapers because he was grossed out by it. And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't know, this is something really normal. Why would you be grossed out by it? You do the same, except you can do it by yourself. And it was just, the wife, actually, the mother had to get up, regardless of the fact that she had wounds and scars and whatnot after pregnancy. She still had to get up at 3 in the morning and change the diapers. And I'm thinking to myself, this is ridiculous, because this woman also, she was telling it to a friend, and she was laughing, and they were like, oh, like, he's a man, so why he's a man, so you can't expect them to know these things. But like, to me, it's so ironic. It doesn't matter what gender you are, you need to be able to take care of a baby, you need to be able to help your significant other, right? Because like I said, having a child, bearing a child, it is a collective responsibility. It's not just something that only the mother does. The father is involved in it too, the boyfriend or the fiance, whoever, there are two parties involved when it comes to, having a child. So obviously, then in that instance, why are we still living up to this, archaic standards of how mothers should be? And why are we, making life so much harder for them and pushing these, very ridiculous and detrimental ideas? And then also we have this question of, the workload when it comes to, the chores in the house, the taking care of children, but also when it comes to, that burden of having a child, looking after that child. What about like your mental health in the process of you looking after your child, right? Because like I said, about 10 to 15% mothers actually experience postnatal depression, and suicide is actually one of the leading cause of death for mothers during their baby's first year. So we need to understand that when it comes to taking care of children, when it comes to when it comes to splitting the workload, when it comes to making sure that both the mother and the father have an equal amount or somewhat equal amount of the workload, we understand that those things happen quite rarely, right? Because like I said, it's only in some countries where you can get paternal leave as well, where you can take care of your child after they're born. That's only in some countries. That's not all over the world. And even now, when it comes to things like that, it's still frowned upon, it's still looked down upon. And I honestly do not understand why that is the case. Now, most mothers actually work part time, where pay is much lower and prospects for promotion are reduced by more than half. And by the time a woman's first child is 12, she's paid on average 33% less than a man, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. So, you begin to understand that there is, in fact, a huge gap when it comes to raising children. Because to me personally, I feel like when you become a mother, whether you make that decision consciously, like intentionally you become a mother, or accidentally you become a mother, but however it happens, you still love your children, right? You still take care of your children. And the thing is, when you have a family, when you're taking care of children, you sacrifice a lot. And despite the fact that there's so many sacrifices that our mothers do, I'm not saying our fathers don't do that as well, because I know so many dads out there who've made so many sacrifices for their children, for their families, right? But in my perspective, I feel like when it comes to mothers actually have to make way more sacrifices, right? Because you have to give up your job, you have to, because you're the one carrying the child. Obviously, you have to give up your job after a while, and even after the child is born, you have to do most of the work, right? Because you're in a traditional stereotypical sort of narrative. The father would go to work, earn the money, and the mother would stay at home and look after the kids. And the thing is, when are we going to understand that women are more than mothers, right? Women have more to do in life than mothers. And just because we're a mother, that doesn't mean our whole identity is a mother. It's just not our identity, it's just part of life. So there is, in fact, a lot of conversation. There is, in fact, a lot of narratives we need to discuss as well. So make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back to discuss it all right after this small break. But until then, make sure you stay tuned.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no, if that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Well, you didn't do very well. And they get upset, And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of lose. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do. Hopefully,
climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest. Maybe the base camp at least.
They're talking about mental health. If you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you'll interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. Welcome to the second hour of my show. I'm super excited to be here on this beautiful Monday morning. It is the 5th of July. And I have to say, time has passed by quite fast, actually. It is the 5th of July already. And, last week it was like the 1st of July. This year has passed by so fast. I feel like this is something that we all have, this revelation. We all have it every year. It's just the middle of the year and you realize, oh my gosh, this year has passed by so fast, right? So obviously that is what we all feel right now, especially because we've been stuck at home as well. We haven't really been feeling how soon time has passed because we've been stuck in the same place forever. But things are changing, vaccination is happening, so which means we might possibly be able to go out soon, right? But very very excited for that, so let's just wait and see how it goes. Okay, but welcome back to this conversation. I'm so glad that you're a part of the show because I love hearing your thoughts, your opinions, your messages, your experiences as well. If you want to share with me, make sure you do that. Just text me on 078 524 73473 and I can, share experiences with everyone else who's listening in as well. Okay. Make sure to follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can keep yourself updated and entertained as well with the best content. And also, make sure you are informed about everything that is happening in the world as well. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get into this conversation about parenting, the cult of the perfect mother, and how it's very, very detrimental to a lot of the mothers out there. So, when it comes to being a mother, what are the different pressures a mother faces? So, one of the main pressures a mother faces is these perfectly filtered images that parents see daily on social media. Now, my best example for this is you have this reality TV shows about parenting, and I can't remember what they're called, but I just remember the name of one person in it. I just remember Austin McBroom. And I can't remember the name of their channel, but if I do remember, I will tell you. But for example, this whole not necessarily them, but there are so many other, YouTube parenting channels, or these YouTube couples that actually talk about, being perfect parents and giving the children the best. And despite all of that, despite the fact that they have 3 4 kids, they still look pretty, they still have that size 8 figure and everything. And when you're a mother was just given birth, who doesn't definitely have that size 8 figure, when you're constantly seeing pictures like that, when you're seeing YouTube videos like that, things are the chances are it's actually going to affect you, right? Which is what is happening in the world right now. A lot of the parents actually say that they can't relate to half of the parents actually say that they can't relate to the pictures they see on sites like Instagram and Facebook that are meant to depict parenting, and 70% actually wish that there was in fact a much more honest representation of what parenthood really looks like on social media and even in pop culture. Because you and I have both seen these amazing parents on, you know on TV shows, in music videos, even in books. But the thing is, you can never be a perfect parent. Like, you can be a good parent though, but you can never be a perfect parent. And where exactly do you draw the line with, being a perfect parent? At what point are you going to stop it? Because it's not only detrimental to yourself, it's also detrimental to your children as well. Because you're sort of setting this precedent, you're sort of setting this example that when they themselves become parents, they have to be perfect. You have no choice if you don't become perfect. If you're anything but perfect, you're failing at what you're doing, right? Which is a very, very negative, which is a very very, how would I put it, distressing, not demotivating way to actually portray parenthood. Now, we live in this world that is very social media scrutinized. It's a global competitive world, and every aspect of a child's life actually must be optimized, right? But because domestic life has become Instagram filtered, privatized, and atomized, this whole, message board actually of perfection, happiness, positivity doesn't actually really exist. Like, realistically, when you think about it, being a parent isn't all happy. Being a parent is stressful. It's tiring. You have to take care of children, and after a while they grow up, and they have their own thoughts and ideas, and then they try to tell you what's better for them and how they know better than you, and it's frustrating, right? So why is it that they never ever portray, realistic images of parenting? I think I've just seen one TV show called The Middle. It's also really funny, but it's about, this family that is not a perfect family at all. They're, a middle income family. They don't really have money, like, or like so much of money, like an exorbitant amount of money to do, ridiculous things. They are like a normal family, and I think it's very important for these companies, it's very important for, organizations as well, to start portraying things that are more realistic, right? Now, that is obviously one of the biggest pressures they face, is because of this whole, social media narrative about perfect parenting. And like something else that, these mothers do when they have to live up to these perfect examples of being mothers, sometimes when they have 3 children, or 4 children, they cook 3 separate dinners for, for different kids, because they're fussy eaters. Whereas their own mothers, the mothers of the mothers, they would have just given them one food item and told them to eat it. Like, eat it. This is what you get to eat. If you can't eat it, then well, you don't have a choice. You will just have to starve then, right? And the thing is, we've made life so hard for all these mothers out there that we're pushing these ironic, ridiculous, detrimental narratives as well, right? Because, if you actually look back on our historic counterparts, all the women back then, they didn't spend so much of time parenting as much as we do right now. And there's also this myth, right, that exists when it comes to all the mothers back then, that they were actually selflessly devoted to their offspring, that they literally gave up like their entire life to be with their children. But actually that's not really true. And that, and the fact that they were so selflessly devoted, that things only changed when they were entering into education, or they were getting a job. But of course, history records this to be false, because before the 20th century, children were actually sent out with witnesses, and they were parked in prams on the street, and they asked their other older children to watch their younger siblings, or even neighbors sometimes. So actually, if you think about it, mothers in a number of Western countries today actually spend more time looking after their kids than they did 50 years ago. So actually, if you think about it, things have really, really changed. And we also have this idea, we have this narrative that, a mother, when you're a mother, you have to put everyone else's needs before them. How much of pressure does that put on a mother? I mean, imagine the fact that you have to completely ignore the fact that you yourself have emotions just to look after your family, and you can't ever get mad. You can't ever, express the fact that you're not okay, because you're not allowed to do that. Because if you do that, you're considered a terrible mother. And also this narrative that you have to always be happy, and you can never ever get angry. Like, what? How ridiculous is that? How can someone never ever get angry? Even a child gets angry. So why are we not letting our mothers get angry? So these are some of the pressures that they face because of some of these narratives that exist. But make sure you stay tuned, because I'll actually be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about this whole imposter syndrome when it comes to being a mom, and what it means to accept the fact that you can't be a perfect mother, but you can be a good mother, and how to actually get out of this mindset. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few more minutes to actually talk to you about it.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about how the generation gap, how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget."
That's it. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter. Yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it," and that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point?
What's
What
the
are you
point?
trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise, and welcome to the final few minutes of the second hour of the show. Okay, now don't worry because I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. and I do have a lot of things to be talking about with you, so make sure you stay tuned, right? But let's quickly get into the rest of this conversation. How this idea of a perfect mother is, in fact, very, very detrimental to a lot of mothers out there, and how to exactly deal with it, right? Now, we all know what imposter syndrome is, right? But if you don't know what it is, it's basically where you have these feelings of inadequacy that persist despite being successful, right? It basically occurs when someone who has experienced success or has knowledge and education still feels as if they are fake, or, that they're a phony. So, what happens is this actually leads to chronic self-doubt, and it also always makes you feel like you're a fraud. So when it comes to being a mother and experiencing imposter syndrome, it is this belief that you're not a good enough parent, and even though you're doing your best and everything, and even though all the other people out there think that as well, and they think that your children are actually taken well taken care of, you feel like you're not doing enough. You feel like you haven't done enough, and you feel so you feel so unworthy of actually being a mother. And what happens is mothers then start feeling guilty all the time. And to be quite honest, this has actually become an accepted part of being a mother right now. Because we've normalized, because we've sort of, made this into a social norm, and we've said, look, you have to be a perfect mother. If you're not doing this, well, you're not perfect, you are failing. And because we have done that, it's in fact making it a very hard experience. In fact, it's making it a very detrimental and negative experience to be a mother. So, we expect our mothers to sort of accept these feelings of guilt as a normal part of motherhood. And if they don't feel guilty, we wonder, they wonder, our moms wonder, or even new mothers wonder what's wrong with them, and then they feel guilty anyway. So basically, if you think about it, it's quite a vicious cycle. And as mothers, they have this superbly innate ability to basically question everything that they do. They always question themselves. They always have low self-doubt. And I'm not saying always, but most of the time, they tend to have low self-doubt, low self-esteem. They doubt themselves. They have no confidence in themselves. So obviously, when it comes to instances like this, it's very, very important that our mothers are told, or even young new mothers are told, that this narrative is detrimental. You can't live up to this narrative, right? Because our mothers, or even new young mothers, they're always questioning stuff, right? Like, am I doing it right? Is everything going according to plan? Am I a good mother? And this generally stems from these enormous expectations that have been forced upon these mothers from society, media, family, and even friends, right? So if your mom life doesn't look like an Instagram account, well, then that means you're definitely doing something wrong, right? And if you're doing it wrong, then that means that you're not good enough. So because of all this controversy that exists, because you're shown on a regular basis what mothers should do, and how mothers are presented with these unreasonable expectations of happiness, it's actually quite heartbreaking and traumatizing as well, if you are a new mother who has to experience all of this. And you can't actually talk about it because it's so normalized, right? Because even when you do try to talk about it, other mothers would be like, oh, you think you're the first person to become a mother, you think you're the only one who's going through that. Well, no. And it sort of becomes this competition almost about who feels worse. And that's even worse because it's not supposed to be a competition. It's supposed to be a place of solidarity where everyone comes together and talks and discusses about how terrible and how, traumatizing these ideals and expectations are, and how these narratives are in fact detrimental and very negative, and it's harming your ability to, function as a mother. It's harming your ability to become a good mother, right? Because there's literally no evidence that says just because you're a perfect mother that means your children are going to be perfect too. And chances are, even if you've tried to live up to this expectation of a perfect mother, it doesn't always mean that your children have grown up to be the most perfect children ever, right? Because like I said, we're all human, we all have our mistakes, we all have our flaws, and the best way to deal with all of that, the best way to actually address that fact, and the best way to help children grow is by being a good mother. But obviously, you can't be a good mother because you're expected to be a perfect mother because of all the societal standards and expectations that are, persistent, that basically exist right now, that make life so much harder, not just for mothers, not just for, parents, but also for children as well. you know because it's always about, providing things for your children. It's always about making sure your kids are okay. But when do you actually stop and think if you're okay? And it's very, very important that despite having children, despite going through all of these 101 issues that are there in the world, that you take a minute to yourself and ask yourself if you're okay. you know because more often than not, when you're a mother, you tend to, like I said, because as young girls, we've been taught to put everyone else's needs before ours. We tend to completely forget the fact that we ourselves are human too. And in that instance, because we forget we're humans, we forget the fact that we have normal human problems like, am I okay? Am I actually happy? Am I actually satisfied? Do I feel okay? Am I feeling burdened? Am I feeling stressed out? Am I feeling anxious? We forget the fact that we ourselves are human, and we forget the fact that we ourselves, need to take care of we ourselves need to take care of ourselves rather, and we need to actually make sure that we're okay. Because if you're not okay, then it's hard to take care of someone else, right? Because you're constantly going to be worrying about everything. You're not going to be happy, you're going to be depressed, and it's going to be very stressful and strenuous for people, right? So, and it's not just people, for yourself as well. It's going to be very, very strenuous. So obviously it's important that you keep that in mind. It's important that you sort of understand that you yourself is a person. You take that, you sit down, take a few minutes and think, am I okay? I've been putting everyone else's needs before mine. I've been contributing to everyone else's happiness, but what about my happiness? What has anyone done for my happiness? Is do people even care about how I am? And those are very valid questions that any mother should ask. And regardless of whether you're a mother or not, that is a very valid question anyone should ask. Because at the end of the day, as much as you're all about taking care of kids, as much as you're all about, looking after your family and whatnot, you also need to take care of yourself, right? Like I said, just because you're a mother, that doesn't mean your whole identity is a mother, right? Like, for example, I'm Sarah, but that doesn't mean I identify as a mother, right? I identify as a woman with ambition, with purpose, with interest, with, goals, different things I want to achieve, different things I like to achieve. And that doesn't mean that my whole life is going to be centered on raising children. Sure, when you raise kids, it's basically a full-time job because you have to take care of your kids. But the thing is, eventually your kids grow up and they're capable of looking after themselves, right? So then obviously looking after your children or being a mother isn't your identity. And what happens is, because of all these narratives that exist, because of how even media portrays a perfect mother, we tend to think that that is our identity. We tend to think that we have no purpose in life beyond the fact that we're supposed to be mothers, beyond the fact that we don't think we have any purposes in life, or we don't think we have any importance in life beyond having children. And like, that's what we're taught at a young age as well, right? You're supposed to be a good mother, you're supposed to raise a family, you're supposed to get married and have a family. And regardless of the fact that we've had 100 years of feminism and even 50 years of the second wave of feminism, we're still stuck in this place where we think, you know where we still think our only goal in life is to be a mother. And it is in fact a very interesting and long conversation, but it is something that needs to be spoken about as well. So make sure you stay tuned, because right now I'm going to actually end this, and I'll be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about how men hide their body image issues, which is another problem, another mental health problem, something that's very strenuous and stressful for a lot of men out there. And we'll be talking about that. But until then, make sure you stay tuned.